Angelo Calbone, who's with Liveworx Community Action in Saratoga, where he oversees community service. Sarah Adams with Trinity Alliance here in the Capital Region, and she leads the Health and Wellness Division. Matt Griffin from Food Bank of the Southern Tier in Elmira, where he leads strategic development. And Sue Littner with the Regional Food Bank of Northeast New York in Latham, where she's the Director of Community Impact. So welcome everybody and welcome to our audience. Thank you all for being here and for all that you do every day. Panelists, I need to ask you to please limit your responses to our questions today to about 2 minutes. I know it's not much time, but we want to make sure we hear from everyone and everybody has a chance to speak. And I think we all really just want to get to our final question here today and not have to cut it short. So I'm going to start with just quickly, if everybody could describe how your organization operations changed because of the pandemic. You know, what did you need to do to pivot to the new need? And Angelo, if I could start with you.
Sure, thanks, Dan. Our food pantry obviously changed drastically. We went from a choice in-person market style pantry where folks would come in and shop for their needs and their items to a touchless doorstep delivery program. So everything is over the phone, and we have volunteers working independently and food getting delivered to customers' doors without any interaction between volunteers or customers. So definitely a little bit of that personal touch out of it, but it was what was needed to keep our customers safe, but our volunteers comfortable coming in and providing their services.
Great, thank you. Sarah, how'd you do with Trinity?
Yeah, so some aligned responses to Angelo, but immediately we had to, reduce the amount of time that our staff were spending with patrons. So we also moved away from the client choice model to a pre-packed bag method. That was sort of our immediate response. And then as the winter rolled around and cases really started to spike locally here in Albany, we had regular check-ins with our staff and the community, and we had to make the decision to move to a 100% delivery model. So we've been doing that largely with our skeleton staff. Our volunteer model has dwindled a bit throughout the pandemic for a myriad of reasons. But we've also had a focus on healthier food and emphasizing, where we can meet the needs and rise to the occasion and adapt a little bit, given the needs that we've seen in the community. So,
thank you. Matt, how did Southern Tier pivot?
Sure, similar to the others, Dan, we had two key actions. We transitioned from high contact walk-through mobile food pantry distributions, which served on average about 100 households per event, to a larger drive-through model that reached about 500 households. And in addition to that, our second major change was the creation of emergency food box assemblies. What we did is basically establish county hubs that could utilize volunteers and other workers to pack shelf-stable emergency food boxes. And these were distributed via schools. They were delivered to the homebound, older adults, disabled, and also used at the mobile food pantries. Those were the two key things, Dan.
Great. And Sue at the Regional Food Bank? Sue, you're muted.
Okay, so for us, our adaptations were really based on going from we've never done that, so we need to think about it kind of model to just saying yes and getting to work on figuring out how, which opened up a lot of opportunities that we're very proud of. But virtually overnight, we had to open up another warehouse here in Colony to allow for volunteers to come in and socially distance, because we can't keep our doors open without that quality food coming in, being sorted, and getting out to our network. Like Matt alluded to, we started our drive-through pantry program, doing about 25 to 30 a month serving anywhere between 250 and 1,000 households, depending on the distribution, and really targeting areas with an expressed need that there was a population that was underserved. We also truly expanded our senior food delivery program from 4 sites to 35 sites. Lots of new partnerships with underserved communities, homebound communities, and just trying to get creative through all this. So it really was in the time of unprecedented need, also a time of innovation for us.
Interesting. So when you all think about the changes that you made in response to the pandemic, what are some things that you did that you think may need to continue after the pandemic? And I'd like to start with Sarah this time, please.
Sure. So one thing that we pivoted and did as a result of the pandemic is pre-pandemic, we were serving the equivalent of 9 meals per member of the house once a month to our community. And we increased the amount of food we were giving individuals and the frequency in which they could visit our pantries. So we moved from 9 to 12 meals or 4 days worth of food and allowed twice a month, moving up from once a month. And we do expect for that to continue. That's proven to be needed and necessary. We also did move to a delivery service. Delivery was not something we did pre-pandemic. It wasn't something we really had capacity for, but given that it was a need, we dabbled in it a little bit with homebound seniors who we knew used to visit our pantry but could no longer make it in. But now that we have some experience under our belt with that, and pending we can build our volunteer corps back, we really do anticipate and are pushing to make sure that that's something that stayed. And then another thing we did that's maybe smaller but was actually pretty important is before you could reach our pantry through our landline or our email, but we added a cell phone line into the pantry and adding an option to text our community members who sometimes run out of minutes on their phone but not texts allowed us, unique access and made us much more accessible during the pandemic to our members. So we expect to keep that and maintain more routes for communication.
Great. That's interesting about the texting. Matt, what do you see continuing at Southern Tier?
Sure. So as Sarah was just discussing, I think the connection with non-traditional partners, we certainly were able to make connections with schools and VA offices, Office for the Aging, to help us with our mobile food pantry distributions and our food hubs. And also this idea of reaching out to people who are in need of food assistance, as Sarah was mentioning, connecting with people through our food finder on our website, social media, text messaging, and coordination with the pre-registration system that we started in partnership with our mobile distribution, which was new. Finding ways to make sure that we're connected with community members and they're aware of the changing face of emergency food and other food resources. That's important to us. Making sure they're connected with 211 helpline resources is integral. And we're hoping to continue that pre-registration format for our mobile food pantries. We didn't have it before, and we're offering both a phone and an online system platform so that people who don't have access to the internet can make a reservation through the phone. Those who do have a computer can do it seamlessly through an online system.
Great, thanks. Sue, at the Regional Food Bank, what do you think needs to continue?
Sure. For us, we plan on doing many of the same things, incorporating them into our regular plan moving forward, but in a more thoughtful way. I think like everyone, it was, overnight there was this unprecedented need. So feeding people became feeling a little bit like playing whack-a-mole, where you're just trying to address every community's need as it's coming towards you. Moving forward, we're really going to be working on identifying underserved populations, working with stakeholders in those communities, developing sort of unconventional partnerships where we don't have trusted partners in place, and trying to address food insecurity that way. But knowing that we have these new systems and programs in place to offer our support in any way possible is very useful. Thanks. Also, increasing the provision of healthy, nutritious foods to communities. We've had some huge opportunities come our way to access foods that we didn't otherwise through programs like Nourish New York that have really been helpful to our network and ultimately those we serve.
Thanks. And Angelo, what do you see continuing at Liveworx?
Yeah, for us, we see the delivery method really continuing. Maybe not at 100%, which we still are at the moment. But we've been able to reach so many more people, and people that truly need it. Saratoga County is very rural. It's tough to get around. Transportation is definitely one of the largest barriers to service in our county for those in need. So being able to eliminate that completely allowed us to better, more easily, and conveniently serve our customers. And frankly, it worked out pretty well for us too. We were able to see what tomorrow looks like. We have a schedule, we have an arrangement put together, so our customers know when they're getting their food. Our volunteers know how busy they're going to be. So we really enjoyed that, I think, on all sides. I think to Sarah's point too, we definitely increased the frequency of service to people, and made that much more apparent. It was no longer that unsaid, unwritten thing of come to us when you're in need. It was come to us when you're in need. Moving through last year, so we definitely saw many more people coming to us frequently. And even some that are just now on a set standard rolling delivery where we don't even need to make contact with them. We just know that every other Tuesday we have a van going out to our most rural folks with food going to them. And I think lastly, again, the level and the type of communication. I love the texting idea. When I think about that for us, but we definitely have a few people that we're working through by email. They'll phone service is not great in some of the rural corners of Saratoga County, and they communicate with us through email. Again, before that may have been deemed either not acceptable or a way that would have caused a second thought. And last year, we're doing it, and to this point now, we're doing everything we can, even if it's a little unconventional.
So, there's always populations that are underserved, even compared to all the folks who are in need so severely. And I just wanted to ask everybody how you adapted to, thoughtfully providing services to those previously underserved populations. And Matt, could you start us off with that at Southern Tier?
Sure, Dan. I was talking a little bit about some of the work we did with partners during the pandemic. So certainly some existing partners really stepped up their game. And, for example, Meals on Wheels acted as a hub for emergency food box packing, and we had some schools that acted as drive-through MFPs. And then the new partners coming on board, several county governments assisted with food hubs. We had Office for the Aging making deliveries to older adult households. So seizing upon those partnerships, as diverse as they are, everyone bringing their skill to the table, I think we can lean on those to target the audiences that may be overlooked, the underserved communities in both our rural, suburban, and urban areas. So we're thinking about those who have transportation or mobility challenges that we talked about, right? The home deliveries or some type of mechanism to get to food to them because of their challenges. Thinking about people who cannot attend traditional pantry hours or access healthy food in the normal framework of the emergency food program. Could we use something like an order ahead program or something where they pick up the food later or have it delivered? So we're brainstorming in that way to beat that barrier. Outreach through healthcare partnerships for those who have both a food insecurity challenge and also a health condition. What ways can we tailor food and get food out to them? And then I think, as we heard earlier today, some work around those community food hubs or centers with the wraparound service, right? So understanding with the social determinants of health, that's much more than food. It's about community engagement and addressing health in a more holistic fashion. And finally, I think looking at ways that we can lean on those partnerships to engage all stakeholders, especially the people we're serving, in making decisions and also taking actions.
Great. Sue?
Sure. For us, and this was a lesson we continue to learn and evolve with. For us, it was like learning to listen, that we don't need to have all of the answers from day one. And we're not always going to get it right, and that's okay. The last year has been full of innovation, as I said before. But one thing we did, really start focusing on along the way was, listening to individuals on the ground, and giving the communities we work with more power. So that's really going to be driving us forward, as we discover that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and way to move the needle on food insecurity. So it was a big lesson, but I think really empowering for us this past year. Also, just focusing on things like senior food delivery, getting into those communities that were disproportionately affected and homebound, but also looking at how we can reach those populations better in the future. Adaptation of our children's program. So we've always sort of had a backpack model, but through the pandemic, we really used it as a way to make sure that families could get access to pantry packages in ways that they weren't necessarily able to before, working with schools on provision of more nutritious perishable foods in a way that we hadn't done prior to the pandemic, particularly in areas where we did not have a robust pantry system. Also, increasing delivery to agencies. We're going to be expanding a program we're piloting here called Just-in-Time Delivery, where we provide delivery of fresh perishable food immediately before an agency opens, so that you can overcome those storage and transportation barriers that we've imposed on you all these years. So certainly any agencies that are on this, reach out to us. We'd love to work with you on it. Also expanding our healthcare partnerships, and really just meeting folks where they are when they're there, instead of making an assumption that we show up or our network shows up at a certain time and that needs to be the time that folks can get there. So that's what we're working on.
Super. Angelo?
So for us, we did this a lot of the same. We listened. We at first we reacted, and we had to figure out how to stay open and how to keep moving. After that, we were able to settle down for a second and listen to our customers and figure out how do we best suit their needs. One of them over the last year was personal care items. So not just focusing on the food aspect, but the toilet paper game of 2020. We constantly were getting questions about, do you have these other items? I can say right now confidently that we have the best looking personal care section in our pantry that we've ever had, because the community responded. We said this is what we need, and they're giving it to us. They're donating these items. We can get amazing food from the food bank, which is wonderful, and we can get personal care sometimes as well. But over the last year, the focus obviously was getting the food out to the pantries. The other thing really was the rural part for us. In developing our delivery model and method, the roots were going out to these communities in these far-reaching corners of the county, and I had to look at a map and go, oh yeah, that is part of our county. Like these are areas, and it was incredible that people were driving this far to come to us. The amount of money that was being spent on gas and transportation, and it's not just always about food. So for us to be able to get the food out to them, I think was an incredible change in a way that we're able to work, and we hope to continue doing that. The last thing is partnerships and working with everybody that's inside of the food game and the new entries. Boston Spa National Bank is one here locally that did a ton of the drive-through pantries with Regional Food Bank, and so we were able to work with them directly to make sure that all of our households knew that this was happening. But also we tapped them for helping us with our Thanksgiving box distribution. They know how to do it. They do it all the time with their drive-throughs, and we were able to reach a huge number of households this year for Thanksgiving, or last year for Thanksgiving, and we're very excited to be working with them again, hopefully this year, and in future years with that sort of a model. I think the thought of not having to do it all yourself. There's so many people out there that are willing to help and step in. Really was apparent over the past year.
Great, thank you. And Sarah?
Yeah. So this question about reaching underserved communities sort of set my mind on two different tracks. And one is, one of our pantries is located in a USDA acknowledged food desert and is traditionally considered an underserved area. So for us, in addition to everything that was said, communication was also a big piece, and something that was really cool that sort of predated the pandemic but reaped benefits during was our pantry moved with the coalition to an online documentation system. So we were easily able to pull our rosters of who our members are, where before this was all on paper, and easily call and communicate our operations to folks, and also listen and ask them what they're experiencing, and get that information so we could very nimbly and react in real time. To Angelo's point about toilet paper and personal care products, we were learning about that and dealing with that in real time. So that communication with community members was just so essential. But be that as it may, there were also individuals who we knew we weren't reaching, and that's where partnerships came into play. And we at the Albany College of Pharmacy here has a public health pharmacy team that are on the ground. They were referring individuals to us. We had neighbors calling in orders for their neighbors. And we really sort of expanded what it meant to be a member of our pantry to really opening, so that we could reach anybody who we sort of got a tip that they were in need of service. So, just trying to make sure that we were accessible and communicating and taking that information and not just taking it, but acting upon it was, crucial at the beginning and throughout the winter.
Great, thank you all. So the next thing we'd like to talk about is what do you hope that everyone has learned about our food system, our whole national food system in the last year because of the pandemic? And Sue, I'd like to start with you on that.
Sure. A few things. First, obvious to everyone here, I hope, but food insecurity is a reality, and just so many people who were showing up had never even, I was at more than one drive-through where I had someone roll down their window and say, like, I've always been a donor and I never thought I'd be on this side of the line. And I know we're not alone in that. I hope that awareness in our community was not a temporary blip, and that people understand that this is an ongoing issue beyond the pandemic. So certainly work for all of us from here on out to make sure people are aware of that. But really, the food system is so fragile and can be broken so quickly. I think that in America, we're just so used to seeing those grocery store shelves. For those of us who are privileged enough, can show up the grocery store and see those shelves so full. And just to see how quickly that food system can be interrupted due to perceived panic or anything else. I know, at the start of the pandemic, I let this be my biggest life challenge, right? But I remember, my now 4-year-old screaming that she didn't have the mac and cheese that I always buy her with the bunnies. And for me, for her, that disrupted her world. But for those that we serve, that's a situation going on every day that's well beyond, Annie's bunnies. And I just hope people understand that. Also for us, the food that became available for food banks and then our network was extremely high quality. So what we had was produce and meats and dairy that traditionally were, very difficult to work with, but when you have no choice but to accept these high quality, wonderful foods, and you need a program in place to purchase and move them, it's amazing to see how quickly and efficiently programs like Nourish New York can be put into place to save really all sides and benefit all sides of our food system. So I can only hope that in years to come, we remember how efficiently we can act if things do break down. Also, every community is so different. Something that we've known for a long time, but the issue is so big that it tends to be difficult to have time to examine. And I know that the food bank is really committed from here on out to recognizing how food scarcity happens differently in different communities, and in any way possible helping to be part of that solution. So.
Thank you. Angelo, what do you hope everyone has learned?
Yeah, I think the message is clear. How close are we all together to the same point of that disruption? Whether it's tomorrow or enough to be able to plan for a week or two out. I think that the scarcity of food in the grocery stores was a perfect sign of people trying to plan ahead and say there may not be food tomorrow. That they need for the next week or the week thereafter. I think that really connected to what many of the people that we serve feel every single day. And it's not just for am I going to have enough food for the next week or two or a month, but do I have enough food for tomorrow or this evening? Because we get those calls for people that they truly need food tonight because they don't have any. I think the other thing on the food supply side was, how amazing is it when everything works together, pull out the stops and go for it. Sue, the food that we get from the food bank is incredible. I open up our fridges and it looks better than what I have at home. It's really good. It's really good stuff. And we're going to be our customers and us are going to be spoiled when Nourish New York goes away. Butter has never been more plentiful, and milk, and all of these great items. We need to start preparing if that's going to hopefully not go away. But I think we were able to recognize and notice what is possible when we're all working together for that common goal. I think that was pretty awesome to see, and I hope that we never have to do it again, but at least we know how to at this point.
Yeah, interesting point. Sarah, what do you hope everyone has learned?
Yeah, I think in addition to some of what was said, I think it's important also to recognize how dependent systems are on one another. And something that's been exciting for me as a public health person working in the food field is the acknowledgement about social determinants of health. But I also hope people recognize that requires intervention on multiple levels. So when we talk about food security, I've mentioned in the South End, we're a USDA designated food desert. Do people have access to food? Is the built environment conducive to access to food? Is the economic environment, the job market, conducive to people accessing food? And looking at what's happening, we know the data is showing that grocery bills are increasing. Is policy keeping up with that? Is there policy at that systems level to support our community members? So, within our network and what Angelo and Sue just described, there has been really remarkable collaboration and interdisciplinary work that's happened throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope that we can see how much value there was in that, and that hopefully I'm not getting ahead of myself in saying this, but hopefully that continues moving forward.
Right. Matt, what do you hope people have learned?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure, Dan, I can add anything new to the commentary. So speaking for myself, definitely my experience has been that food insecurity has many faces, and so many community members are hurting. And at the same time, look at the response of our communities to this situation and letting everyone know, especially our neighbors who are most vulnerable, that there are people accompanying them, that it's another resource to them in their toolkit, and to think of ways to reach out. And you know, where there is stigma, we as a community try to find ways to overcome that. I think overall human nature is good. This crisis has shown just the tremendous work of so many individuals and corporations and governments, that it's really inspiring to me, and I think to my food bank colleagues in our network. I think more about looking at our section of the food system, the emergency food network. Those focus on food insecurity. And what comes to my mind is just the human elements of what we're doing. So we talked about the importance of communication and how important it is to have solid communication within our groups, within our organizations, whether it's food bank or food pantry, with our partners, with the people we're serving, with the larger public, whether it's through social media or our websites, so on. And also to think about how our decisions impact others. We need to continually look at that. In addition to that, the importance of trust and thinking about how we can continue to build off the relationships that we developed during the pandemic and move the needle. So whatever the topic is, whatever the focus is, we have that relationship to work off. And then, as someone mentioned, flexibility. We need that to innovate. And finally, in all things, being client-centric. How does this decision impact the people we're serving? And I'd say lastly, at final part 2 is, for all of us who are involved in this work, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to focus on reinvigorating ourselves, because this is a journey, right? This is a long-term thing. We can do it together. We take care of ourselves first, and then we can set ourselves to take care of others and work together.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. I'm so glad we were able to get all this content out there quickly, because we got like the one big question left that we all want to talk about, and that is predicting the future. Right? So everybody grab your crystal ball, polish it up. And I just want to let everyone in the audience know we were hoping to share some data here today, and I'm not able to do that. But I wanted to ask the panel, and folks, if you have comments you want to share, please do, about what do we do next? What are we going to do in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? And this is not a completely blue sky question. If we look at the data, if we look long term at what's going on, what's driving hunger, right? If you look at national income data, you can go back 100 years, okay, really long term. And you'll find that, the bottom 50%, right, half of the United States population in that time tends to, have a share of the national income maybe in the teens, right? Half the people, they don't have half the income. And that's been declining since 1970, right? 50 years where the trend line is clearly downward. And right now, the 50% of the United States population that's in the lower half of the income distribution is at about the same share of national income as they were in the 1920s. So just to frame this question, let's assume that the past is the best predictor of the future, that, 5 years, 10 years from now, the income distribution looks about how it is now. Then what do we do? What should be our response in the Charitable Food Network? What public policies should we be advocating for? What do we do about this? 50 years of this kind of income decline. And I just want to throw it out, no order here. Whoever wants to respond first, jump in. We've got about 20 minutes or so. Let's have a thoughtful discussion here. What do we do now? Okay, Sue.
So I attended a Feeding America conference a few weeks back, and one of the points they kept making over and over was being realistic. The pandemic is not over, and their projections are that it's going to take us 5 years to get to pre-pandemic rates of food insecurity. So, as Matt said, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint, although it felt like a sprint for a long time. So we need to be realistic with ourselves, our commitments to our communities, and just be mindful of that. But that doesn't need to be done in a vacuum. So yes, we're dealing with unprecedented rates of food insecurity, but that doesn't mean that we have to be in this reactive mode any longer. So for us, it means starting to listen and working with communities that know themselves best, and being as inclusive as possible when trying to create solutions to move the needle on food insecurity, inch by inch, and identifying and working towards customized solutions with communities throughout our service area, instead of saying like, we're coming in and this is our one size fits all solution, which might have worked in terms of putting Band-Aids on food insecurity in the past, but I think we can all say we haven't worked ourselves out of a job yet. So that's ultimately what we're here to do, moving that needle, and that's going to come from working together and figuring out what works best in each pocket throughout our service area. Also acknowledging that food insecurity is a piece, as Sarah alluded to, it is part of a social determinant of health, but it does not exist in a vacuum. So the more work we do forging partnerships with other public health organizations addressing food insecurity, that might be the food bank's role in it. But partnering with other public health organizations on their piece, I think are more able to move the needle on those root causes, to ultimately get people off our food lines. And so this is not a problem that's going to be solved overnight, but I do think we've learned so many lessons through the pandemic, and that innovation is just starting at this point. So I think there's been a lot of great conversation generated through this, and look forward to continuing it in time to come.
Great. Matt?
Sure, I could jump in, piggybacking on Sue's comments. I'm thinking about the pandemic and the challenges that we all face with the isolation, combined with the unrest during the same period, and all the things that have been happening. And my bet is that there's a good number of people out there in our communities who want to learn more about their neighbors and get out and maybe encounter those who may not be like themselves. And I think that's a great opportunity to broaden people's experiences, including those who are suffering from food insecurity. And I look to our network as a great vehicle because food brings people together. So whether it's a food pantry, a community meal, the community food hubs that Katie was talking about earlier, that provides wonderful media for starting a conversation. And then we get to unpack, as Sue was alluding to, the realities and experiences and challenges that all of us neighbors face. And many of us face the same similar problems. We all have to pay bills. We all have to, if we have children, pay for childcare in some instances. We're probably more common than we realize. So how can we utilize the current network as it is to continue to build those relationships and create informed citizens, so that then we can kind of tap into these meaty issues that you're getting at about income inequality, and poverty. They're very tough. It's probably worth dozens of conversations. So I think the start is setting up the platform for those discussions.
Great. Sarah?
Yeah, and I think, in some ways, this speaks to the need to continue to break down silos. And I think, to Sue's point, with the projection that it's going to take 5 years to get to pre-pandemic food insecurity, we know that long-lasting macro-level policy change takes a while, especially when it gets implemented in a way that cannot be easily reversed. So we know we're going to be in this needing to be creative and innovative for 5-10 years. And what's been working and what, seems to be a trend is this talk about breaking down silos. And we've seen some action in that with the business sector getting involved and the healthcare sector and managed care organizations getting involved in food insecurity, and our coalition doing a lot of advocacy and tapping pretty non-traditional partners that have supported our safety network and the emergency food assistance network. So, I'm going into this with the understanding that we are going to need to continue with this, I don't want to say pandemic mindset, but thinking about food insecurity in that way for some time. And without macro level policy change and infrastructure change, it's that little innovation that we'll see on the ground level that will move the needle in whatever direction.
Now, Sarah, you said something really interesting about how do you bring change that is actually sustained, that doesn't just get reversed. And, a great example of that is Nourish New York, right? That was a brand new it was a response to a crisis. And New York State invested $85 million in that program this past year. It's still going on as we speak. I think everybody would agree it's been a real home run. Helped out a lot of farmers. It's enabled food banks to distribute some terrific food. It's helped the people in need. I saw in the comments that there was a statement that it's on the official budget for New York State this year. I just want to clarify that. It's really important that we all understand this. Nourish New York was a crisis response, and we have been working to make that a permanent, non-reversible, in Sarah's words, part of the state support or the state response to this issue. And it did pass both the Senate and the Assembly. As far as I know, the governor has not signed it yet, so we're not quite there. I would love to be wrong on that point, but here's the really important thing is that there's no budgeted number for that next year. So it is probably going to become a permanent part of the state's response, but we're all going to have to work to attach a number for that. There's nothing that says it's going to be, $85 million next year. It might be zero next year. We're all going to have to work on that. So just a little aside there. Angelo, your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think, there's everything that we're talking about with the food, and then there's the macro, what we're dealing with going on right now with the income inequality and what we're looking at, potential inflation going on post-pandemic of things. It could get more expensive to live, and if pay rates don't increase in order to be able to sustain that, it could get worse before it gets better. But I think to what everybody's saying is we need to continue operating in the pandemic mindset of being flexible, being innovative, thinking that how can we do this? Not we've never done this before, so we can't do that. There's definitely a change in mindset of, if you would have asked me 18 months ago, how do you operate a delivery-only food pantry? I would have said it's not possible. I don't know how to do that. We've never done it before. Right. And here we are, and it is not going away. And for good reasons, because we love it and because our customers appreciate it. So I think it's that level of thought, innovation, and how do we continue working to destigmatize food pantries, those people who came through the first time and felt a sense of shame or a sense of that they don't belong here. How can we create that space and conversation that allows everybody to participate and belong? If you're in need of food, that's what we're here for. I think those those types of recognition that, yeah, food insecurity can hit anybody at any income level at a moment's notice, and we definitely witnessed that over the past year. So I think, yes, just working together, working for the common good, and the goal of putting ourselves out of business, right? Like that's right. Wouldn't it be nice? But yeah.
Yeah, those are great thoughts, everybody. And, I sure don't have the answer. I hope, Matt, I think it was you who said this should be the start of many long conversations. I think that's absolutely right. When you look at these trend lines in national income, you look at the wealth gap, which is even greater than the income gap, or you look at the racial equity statistics, we're not getting better, right? And these are very long-term trends. They started, 10 to 15 years before this whole network of food banks and food pantries got going, right? That was kind of the lag, and then we all responded, or I should say our predecessors responded, and here we all are. And so sometimes people say, well, we need to do more food banking or food pantry work, and others say, well, we need to do more SNAP. And, I think clearly we need to do both, right? But even having done both, and we all are involved in both of these things, that trend keeps going. And we're not putting ourselves out of business. And we sincerely want to. And I don't know the answer other than bending those trend lines, which means higher wages, fuller employment, really fundamental economic policy that needs to change. And that may sound a bit pie in the sky to some people, but if we go back to the data, there have been times in our history when we did those things. The lower half of the population did a lot better from roughly 1940 to, let's say, around 1970, right? Their share of national income was on the rise during most of that time. How do we go back to that? And does anybody, here's another question. Does anybody see, any bright signs here in our current administration? I mean, they're going big on some things. Does anybody think that the next 3 years, this Biden administration, do you see those trend lines changing? Not.
I'm not currently getting remunerated for making such prognostications, so.
Can you do it for free?
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, this is a tough one, but I think Angela, you brought up some points about inflation and what those dynamics are, and the stimulus certainly helped some families. We saw some lower numbers in their mid to late winter. Are those going to come back up? It's all big questions in terms of use of emergency food programs. So I can't hazard a safe guess. I'm not sure, Dan.
I also don't have one of those magic 8 balls, although I wish I could. But it is nice to see an administration that is committed to some of these policy changes that are addressing some of the root causes of poverty, and addressing some funding for programs, specifically addressing food insecurity. So we'll see how things go from here on out. So. Then coming off the last year, it would be tough for any administration to say that food insecurity should not be addressed at this point.
Right. I mean, I do know they're looking at the Thrifty Food Plan, right, which is the basis for both SNAP levels and also, the measurement of poverty itself. I think that's long overdue. Don't know what'll happen there. So. Someone made the comment that, it took 10 years to get over the last recession, which is about right. You know, how long is it going to take to get over this recession? You know, we went into it much faster than we did the last recession, 2008, 2009, and for different reasons. But, you know, what do we think? I mean, I've talked to several food bank directors who think that we've got several years to go. And some of you have said today, we've got several years to go of probably service levels something like what we're seeing now. I mean, we're not seeing it come back down, I don't think. Does everybody think that's going to be the trend the next few years? I'm seeing heads nodding.
I think we certainly need to be prepared, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think we set ourselves up a little bit for the pandemic in terms of the food banks and food pantries being ready to a certain extent, but we learned that probably we need to do a little more preparation. And we can seize upon those lessons that we talked about today.
Yeah, I think the effort that has happened over the last year and a half, from the food pantry level to the food banks to donors, has just been incredible. And I see now today, I'm not the only person who was told by somebody before this started that it was impossible, right, Angelo? Like, people said, yeah, I remember asking somebody about 2 years ago, you know, what would it take to increase your food distribution 20%? This person said to me, oh no, that's impossible. We can't do it. And that same organization has increased their distribution over 100%, right? So we're all doing these things that everyone said couldn't be done. And it's amazing. And imagine if this network weren't here, what would have happened? I mean, it would have had to have been invented on the fly, you know, where who knows what would have happened. So there's a question, do we know if subawardees will remain part of Nourish New York? I too do not have a crystal ball, but I would say that bureaucracies tend to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? They're very good at that. So I would suspect that the way Nourish New York is administered now will be the way it gets administered in the future. I doubt you'll see fundamental changes. I'm not saying we want that. I'm saying that's probably what will happen. Any final thoughts from anybody? We got a couple minutes. Any questions from our audience? Hey, not seeing anything. I just want to thank everyone for being here today, for your thoughtful answers, and just thank you so much for everything you do. I know you're all out there every day giving 100%, and there's nobody giving out medals to people at the end of this thing. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and you're great people, and really appreciate all that you do. So thank you.